Welcome to the channel. We're starting something new this time. For the first time, we have background music for a live stream for this channel, Protect Animal Life. See how it goes. Let me know what you think. Don't want it to be too loud. I want you to hear my voice. Although personally, I'd be delighted just to listen to this music. Well, tonight we're going to have something a little different. In some ways very much similar to what we've done in the past. The title is Ropen, or Pterodactyl Ropen is the title. And we're going to talk about all aspects of this long-tail flying creature. What is it? Why is it such a controversy? We'll talk about some criticisms, what some people have said about, well, can't really be a modern pterosaur. Modern pterodactyl? No. Too much music. But I hope we get some participation. Usually it takes a while. Let's take a look, see how it's going. No comments yet. I'd like to remind you that we do have some ways to contact me if you want to get in touch, whether it's a sighting or you want to report your experiences, or you know somebody that's had a sighting. Let me know. I'd love to hear about it. I'd be delighted. I've received hundreds of eyewitness sighting reports over the last 17 and a half years from 5 continents of the Earth, and even hundreds of reports just from North America, even hundreds just from the United States. That's people say it's unbelievable. How can it be? It's a Western culture. It has to do with a particular way of looking at things like dinosaurs and pterosaurs. Anyway, we're welcome everybody that's going to participate here, and you can. This is the contact page. Excuse me. I was giving you the URL of the Protect Animal Life on YouTube. That's what that is. But contact me here. It's a contact form. Now, why do we think that this is a? Why do we think that this is a modern pterodactyl or Rhamphorhynchoid pterosaur, descended from Rhamphorhynchoid pterosaur at least? Where does that come from? Well, there are 2 basic types of pterosaurs that have been known from the past, and there's a more complex situation in recent years. But generally, people think of these as the 2 types. There's the long-tailed and the short-tailed. There's also a difference in the way that the head connects to the neck and so on, and other features, and the kind of tail it is. But generally, we think of long tail or short tail. And the Ropen is a long-tailed modern pterodactyl, pterosaur. People call them flying dinosaurs, dinosaur birds, prehistoric birds, so on, featherless flying creatures. So let's get into this. If nobody has any questions yet, I would like to get along here with what happened in the first few years after my investigation started. I'm not a pioneer in this narrow branch of cryptozoology. I'm not one of the first ones to go off into a jungle looking for live pterodactyls. I had my expedition in the year 2004. There was another expedition in the same island I was on a few weeks later in 2004. But basically, there have been expeditions in the 1990s, and I think one in the year 2002 by Paul Nation and his son Nathaniel. Nathaniel went with him on that one in 2002 on Umboy Island. And I think it helped a lot with establishing friendships. Not much in terms of sightings like mine. I didn't have a sighting myself personally, and Paul Nation didn't at that time either, but that was for searching for the Ropen of Umboy Island. That's where we got the name, Ropen. It's from that particular island, the Kovai language, which is spoken in villages like Gumlagan and Opai. They have that word Ropen specifically for this nocturnal flying creature that glows at night, and it flies around and There's legends about it, of course, and all kinds of superstitions and different things that they talk about, but people actually see something real, daytime and nighttime, not just flying lights. Some people see that they're real flying creatures in the daytime, including Rex Yappy, who's been on a long series of expeditions in recent years on Umboy Island, and he had his sighting years ago while he was on a small boat with some other natives. So there was a huge ropen. It was probably that main ropen that just controls the island. It considers it its own territory and defends the territory, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure. I haven't really challenged that ropen, but anyway, he said that ropen that was underwater, mostly submerged, but the tail was out of the water. He said the tail was 7 meters long. That's 23 feet. That's the same estimate that was given by Gideon Coro when I was there in 2004 and interviewed him and two of his friends. Well, one of them was a brother and his friend. Those 3 natives I interviewed, a gigantic ropen. See if we got any people coming on yet. Not yet. Okay. So contact me if you have any questions. But that particular sighting by Rex Yappy was in the daytime. It was the same area where I'd been on a banana boat many years earlier, and I know the area. But it is rare for these nocturnal animals to be coming out in the daytime. There's various reasons for that. Before we get involved with answering questions and the discussions, I'd like to read you something recently that I got. It's a comment on one of my videos on this channel. That video was pterodactyl sightings. But here's what it said, this comment. I'm quoting now. Listen to this. Back in the 80s, 1980s, quote, back in the 80s, around 100 of us were kicking back on a cut line having lunch. Should mention this cut line as a firefighters. Okay. Quote, we were fighting fire. At one point, we spotted a big bird coming down the cut line, and it was at a distance where we all thought it was an eagle. But the closer it got, the bigger it got. At that point, you could hear a pin drop. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. It flew about 70, maybe 80 feet above us. And at that point, my curiosity went to total fear. If this thing decided he wanted one of us, it would have been that easy. That's how big it was. It looked to be 20 feet across at the wings. The wings reminded me of a bat. The head had a long beak with a big point in the back of its head, and it had a tail as well. I believe it was a ropen. Quote, and it didn't have one feather on it. When it flapped its wings, it was so smooth and carried a long distance with just one flap of its wings. This was in northern Alberta. No roads for hundreds of miles around us. It even hung its head down and looked at us as it flew by. I still feel uncomfortable talking about it because I still can't believe it. Unquote. That's one of the eyewitnesses, one of those many eyewitnesses there in that remote area of Alberta, Canada. So I think that it was Alberta, wasn't it? I don't see it written here. It's funny, I can't see things when I'm looking for it. I'm getting old. But it's northern Alberta, yeah. Okay. So we're glad that you've come, and hope that you enjoy your stay here. We're going to be here for a while. Please feel free to ask questions, but we'd like, if possible, to hold this to the ropens. The most common type of modern pterodactyl, pterosaur, flying dinosaur, dragon, whatever you want to call it. The most common type is what we call ropen. We have some knowledge from the natives on Umboy Island. I started to learn a little bit of their language when I was there, a little bit before, but I didn't know nearly enough to even get into trouble. I did know enough of talk pisson language to get into trouble if I was to talk very much. But mostly I used that skill in listening, trying to understand what people were saying when they used talk pisson. But anyway, whatever. I had no doubt that the Ropen is real, or I would never have spent so many thousands of dollars on my own money to go there to Umboy Island to search for it. If I didn't mention this before, my interpreter and bodyguard and laundryman and basic counselor, Luke Pena, he did have a sighting with the native village leader, Mark Cow, as I recall his name, Mr. Cow, and they saw the flying light against the background of Mount Bell, which is plainly in view from the Gumlagon area where we were. I was asleep at the time. I just couldn't spend all night staying up looking at the sky for a flying light. I had to sleep. So I was unlucky, but I got some incredible sighting reports there. Now, what is a Ropen? Well, we have a sense that it's probably related to, at least I'm convinced, it's probably related to the Sordes pilosus, which is known from fossils, but there are some differences we better get into. But why do I think it was a Sordes pilosus? Well, on my own expedition, I was a forensic videographer. I interviewed people for attorney firms, so I'm used to just keeping an open mind to whatever comes up in a particular conversation that I'm videotaping for legal evidence for possible use in court in the United States. But I didn't go to Umboy Island in 2004 as in any part of any business within the attorney firm. It was totally on my own. But I had to keep an open mind and just go whatever direction the conversations would take us, with these natives. And I had a chance to get a lot of things done that way, get places and go different directions with the investigation that would not have happened otherwise. However, be aware how much I admire my two American associates who went on the expedition just a few weeks after mine. I really admire what they did. They were extremely well organized ahead of time. They had a whole list of questionnaires, precisely what they would ask. Some of it turned out to be irrelevant for any particular sighting, but they were still prepared to go down each list of what they're going to ask. They got some interesting things. They had this silhouette images, 34 silhouette sketches of bats, birds, and pterosaurs, so that they could test the natives to see if maybe there's some misidentification here, and that has come up a lot with Western criticisms and on our investigation, saying, well, maybe the natives are just misidentifying, flying fox fruit bat or some kind of bird or something. But they had all these dozens of images. And the best I could tell, because Garth Gessman, one of those Americans, the other was David Wetzel, but Garth Gessman gave me copies of at least some of the reports. I think they're all of them. There were the principal ones, I think, were two. With the eyewitness Jonathan Ragu and the eyewitness Jonah Jim. I had met Jonah Jim myself, but I was in a hurry. I couldn't spend much time interviewing him when I was there. I was in a hurry to catch a ship to get off the island. I was running out of money. I had to get going. But they fortunately had time to spend with him. Interesting to note, and I know I've mentioned this before, but it was just astonishing to me. I just delighted at what happened. Of the interviews they had, as far as I can tell, only two natives really had a good enough sighting that this system that my associates had with their interviewing, where they have all a list of questions and they have this sketchbook, a sketch page, and only two of the natives, that's Jonah Jim and Jonathan Ragu, had that good enough sighting that could really be relied on to say, well, this is what they saw. Guess what? They didn't have any knowledge of the other. Jonah Jim and Jonathan Ragu, they didn't know about each other's choice, but they both chose the Sordes pilosus, which is a Rhamphorhynchoid pterosaur. Out of those 34, it's not a coincidence. I think the Ropen of Umboy Island has a basic shape of a Sordes pilosus. Of course, the size is enormous compared to fossils of Sordes pilosus, and it may have a long horn on the back of the head from other sightings we have in that part of the world. But let's see if anybody's here yet. Not yet. We're a little bit early here. I'm Jonathan Whitcomb. This channel is Protect Animal Life. So I have no doubt that the Ropen of Umboy Island is descended from some pterosaur of the past that was related to the Sordes pilosus. Now, I'm not a paleontologist, but I just have to tell you just off the top of my head what some of the things that come to my mind, you know, with these fossils and these reports of modern pterosaurs. One of them is it possible, and I'm not a paleontologist, is it possible that these fossils of the Sordes pilosus, they're small, and the creatures have big eyes. Is it possible they're juveniles, just baby pterosaurs, and that the adults, after a period of time as they grow, will grow a head crest, which some pterosaurs do that, or they did that in the past. And that's why we have a head crest on these gigantic Sordes pilosus pterosaurs with a long tail on the flange at the end of the tail. So now let's get to this again. And it usually takes a while for people to get on here. But what is it about this Ropen? Whether or not it's closely related to Sordes pilosus, what we do know is that it has a long tail, it has a flange at the end. And sometimes an eyewitness will notice a long, you see this image here of that I have on my wall here. That's a sketch from Patty Carson. She drew this according to her memory, she was highly impressed by her experience, and she just was so impressed her that she just remembered. And she was a talented artist. You know, sometimes a talented artist, they have a skill at just remembering what something looks like, and they can just draw it and sketch it out later. She had that talent. But her experience was it had a long head crest that kind of curved. Let's see if we can get an image of this somewhere here. Here it is. The Ropen. This is her sketch. Teeth in the beak. I have a number of sightings of this in North America. The teeth in the beak. Now, not all eyewitnesses report this, but they do report the long tail with a structure at the end, a diamond or a spade or triangular ball or shape of some type at the end of the tail, and a long head crest. Not all of the reports are that way, but many of them are. And not all of them say they saw teeth in the beak, but many of them would not really have that capability to see teeth if the mouth was closed and it was flying at a distance, you know, pretty far away. How could they possibly see that there were teeth in the beak? But some of them got closer views, and they said, yeah, Patty Carson was one. Teeth in the beak, long, sharp little teeth, many of them, many teeth. It's not a bird. Let me tell you what happened early on. My expedition ended late in the year 2004. And then by 2005, maybe even early 2005, we started getting criticisms online because I was publishing web pages about this, my experience, and my associates, a few weeks after I did, they had incredible discoveries. Incredible. So much they learned. And putting our two expeditions together, I couldn't have, I had to publish blog posts, web pages. I just had to try to tell the world about it. And I got criticisms. Whoa. Things like, the first thing that came up was dishonesty. Oh, it's all lies. You know, natives are just telling lies. And people would throw out this thing like it's just, you can dismiss it by just saying natives are liars. They just, pulling the Americans along, telling these lies. That did not hold up for many years. It's obviously not that. And it's also a very bad way to think about the little dark-skinned people that are in remote areas of the world think they're liars just because they say something that's not according to our own imagination of the way the world should be. Well, the world is not always exactly how we imagine it in our mind. Things can be different, you know. We can think of something and imagine all dinosaurs and pterosaurs became extinct 65 million years ago, even 66 million years ago if we're going to be precise. But how do you know? How many kinds of life do we have on the earth right now? You know, to say that every single species had to have become extinct at a precise time is absolute rubbish. It's not science. No, there's, from my knowledge, there's a clear idea I want to share with you, that of all the pterosaurs, whenever they lived, and I'm not saying that they lived millions of years ago at all, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that's a popular idea, but whatever that time was, of all those many, many pterosaurs that we know a little bit about from fossils, but the vast majority have never left any fossils. We don't know what they look like, because no scientist can know that because they didn't leave fossils. But of all those many, many, many species and types, and apparently, the best I can tell, they're extinct. The vast majority of them they're all dead. I don't know how long ago it happened. It could have been in more recent generations or centuries, some of them, because people kill things that are dangerous or cause problems or kill their chickens, like in one case in the Wales in the British Isles. Kill off these weird flying creatures that go after their chickens. They just kill them until there are no more of them. Anyway, the point is that even though the vast majority of pterosaurs seem to be extinct, there are a limited number of species, a few, and they're mostly uncommon or rare, nocturnal, for the most part, most of them at least, and they are still living. They're not close to extinction as far as I know. They're not, as far as I know, confined to any particular species, any particular area, though I could be totally ignorant of this. You know, I'm just saying, as far as I know, they seem to have spread out over the world. And remember, I told you I got 5 continents where people have communicated with me about these flying creatures. And there's striking similarities to some of the descriptions. Let's see what we have with the chat now. Yeah, Jeremiah Yeo, thank you. How are you doing? Yeah, I'm glad you got it here too, Jeremiah. Thanks so much for coming. Jeremiah's been with us before on these. Basically what it looks like is we're going to get into these reports and getting these live streams on Fridays, Utah time, which is a mountain time. I try to start about 4:30, and we might go to as long as 6:30 at the most. And Jeremiah says you have a standardized series of questions that you would typically go through to interview those who have reported sightings. It's a good question, and I've been advised more than once that I should have a set number of questions, and I'll explain why I don't, at least not on paper. So it is this: the great majority of sighting reports I've gotten, until at least the last very recent years, the vast majority of the reports I get are eyewitnesses who send me an email, and I will answer the email normally. I hope I haven't missed any email of any of you might be watching now, because on occasion I may have missed one. But they'll send me an email, and then I respond according to what they've told me, because each email is so different. They tell me different descriptions, and I don't just repeat a bunch of questions when maybe they've already answered that question in the email they just sent me. That's not right. But I try to frame my email response in a way according to what they've communicated with me in that first email. Most of the time, they will not answer, and I will just have that one email. It's over 50%. So then what use is the standardized system? I should have, though, pasted up here. I have an old computer monitor with some paper taped up. I should have there a list of certain things just so I don't forget. But basically the things that I would ask, if they didn't already tell me, were things like, can you estimate the wingspan? And what time of day was it? You know, some of day and some at night. Or did it have a long tail? This is one of the most common ones I ask is, did it have a tail? If so, was it long, or would you say it was medium or short? And I let them kind of determine. I don't usually ask them, to estimate number of feet, how many feet long was it? I was just trying to get a general idea. And if the creature is flying, which usually it is, then how can you really tell unless it's flying close to something you recognize, a particular tree, a particular building or something? You can get an idea of how big the creature is, and then you can tell how long the tail was and so on, but just get a general idea. So that's my phone. My wife will get that. That's my phone. So that's it. But that's a good question. And I was saying a little while ago that I greatly admired the two Americans that followed me in 2004 on that island in the year 2004 in the Southwest Pacific, because they were so well organized with all this lists of questions. And they're just beautiful, detailed. And a lot of them, of course, would not prove to be relevant when they're interviewing people. But I'll tell you another reason why I don't go that route, though I admire people that do, because it can have extra benefits that you don't have with my system or my way of doing it. Is when I have some communication with an eyewitness, I'm very aware that they have their own life. They don't just have a life based upon pterodactyls appearing. They have other things in their life. And I don't want to take up too much of their time, if possible, and just get right to what seems to be the most important thing at that moment with their particular sighting. So I want to be careful, use their time as wisely as I can when I'm communicating with them. Respect their time. But that's a great question. I appreciate that, Jeremiah. And I think I probably do need to have something out here in front of me so I will remind me of certain things. But basically, it's long tail. So the Ropen is long-tailed, but is it possible? Let me get to the old criticisms that happened back in the early days, like 2005. The year after those two expeditions in the Southwest Pacific, it started with accusations, the people are lying, the natives are lying. If it's an American, the American is telling a lie, It's just throwing out something without getting any kind of investigation on it or looking into it, just so people can get rid of it and just keep on thinking what they want to think, that all species of dinosaurs and pterosaurs became extinct millions of years ago. So they can just dismiss everything that people say that's contrary to that. Well, we got some interesting things. One was, I would tell you this, I think it's a lady, but it could have been a man. From the name, it's hard to tell. But this is maybe early 2005 even. I saw this website, and it was really derogatory, really criticism, and really gross. It's kind of mean-spirited. And we thank you for His Word is Life. Thank you for coming. Welcome. Glad you're here. If you've been here before, it looks a little familiar. His Word is Life. Your name looks familiar. But anyway, one of the things that came up very soon is this is the website that had, I'll tell you what it's like. The URL, the address of the web page, had words like stupid and lies. In other words, insinuating that we're my associates and I are liars, or the people that report sightings to us are liars, and the stupid, combining those two in the URL. That didn't last too many years, but when it first started, this I think I'd call her a lady. I'm not sure if she was a woman or a man, but anyway, she was so critical, and she just blasting. It looked like she just was angry and just written a bunch of stuff. In one sentence, she made 5 factual errors, just errors of fact. She misspelled my first name. She misspelled my last name. She said I went on an expedition to Africa. I've never set foot in Africa in my life. She says that I was leading a group of creationists. I've never led any group of creationists anywhere doing anything. She said I was sponsored by Carl Baugh from Texas. I was never sponsored by Carl Baugh. to do anything or say anything or go anywhere. Never. And it's just that in one sentence. I think how dependable is a person that just hypocritical when they can make that many factual errors. And it's not a matter of opinion, you know. It's like, I've never been to Africa. That's a fact. My name is not spelled like that. She missed a letter. My last name is not spelled like that. My first name is spelled like, you know, it's just that. And then, and then she went on raving about, I don't remember the details after that. I was just impressed by that sentence. But basically, one of the things that kept coming up in those first few years was dishonesty. People are lying. This can't be honest people telling the truth. And that came about actually before my expedition a number of years earlier. And this was in 1997, a few years before the end of the 20th century. And that was with the Perth couple in Perth, Australia. Maybe we can get into that a little bit. Jeremiah says, could you obtain a list of these questions from these two Americans that you mentioned, whether or not they all are relevant? It would be very helpful for the sake of creating a database. Yeah, of course, part of the problem is I think I can look at it on my computer, maybe even while we're doing the live stream, possibly. Can't guarantee it. My computer's not well organized with different files and data drives and things. But definitely we need to get to it next time or soon if I don't get it tonight. But the problem is that only 2 of the sightings where they got all those details recorded, only 2 were really dependable, in my opinion, because it was clear that the native they interviewed was an eyewitness and got a good view. In other words, it got a good sighting of it and could tell you if it had a long tail or not. Jonah Jim and Jonathan Ragu, they both had really good sightings. In both cases, they saw the bioluminescent glow. In other words, they saw a shape of the Ropen, as they call it. They saw a shape of a creature with wings and a long tail, and they saw a glow that was on it. I'm almost positive about Jonathan Ragu. Don't hold me to that. I'll have to check, but definitely Jonah Jim. Bioluminescence, and this ties in the 2 types of sightings we have with modern pterosaurs. One of them is simply a flying light that appears the characteristics of, it could be a flying creature that's bioluminescence, and the other is an obvious pterodactyl, you know, it's no feathers, it's big, and it's just not a bird or bat, it's a pterodactyl. People are sure sometimes, absolutely positive, that they saw a pterodactyl. And for the most part, they did. I mean, the great majority of those cases, they really did see a modern pterosaur. However, then there's the other type, the third type, or the second, or the 3, whatever you want to number them. The other type is a person sees both the form and features of the flying creature, so they can see, yeah, it's a pterodactyl. That's a pterodactyl. It is a pterodactyl. And they also see the glow because it's getting dark or it is dark. And they can see that the creature is actually emitting some light from it. And I admit there are some sightings, like in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, California. 2 sightings, in fact, from that area around North Hollywood and around there. Those 2 sightings were hard to classify exactly because, well, I don't know if objectively you could be sure that they're saying from those descriptions what they saw that it looked like a pterodactyl. I'm just sure because circumstantial evidence. In other words, the 4 eyewitnesses were involved in those 2 sightings years ago in San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles, Southern California. Those 2 sightings, if they could actually see well enough that they could really say it was a pterosaur rather than a gigantic bird or a gigantic bat. But still, circumstantial evidence is pretty clear. It was a Ropen, I think. I mean, right by the Los Angeles River, and we have so many sightings of Ropens by the Los Angeles River, many of them at daytime, where clearly you can see a long tail and a pterodactyl. Yeah, okay, and here's Jeremiah says, perhaps we could email correspondence and come up with a list. Well, in some way, yeah, but we need to, keep an open mind. This is we've been doing certain things like this before. If you'd like to help, I'd be delighted for help, of course. Yancey Ricks Hello Mr. Whitcomb, how are you? Have I been away for a while? Sorry about that. Glad you're back, Yancey. I think it was a few weeks ago and that you were here with us in His WordisLife. Has there ever been a report of the Ropen hurting people? Yeah, we had a whole live stream one night was totally about that. And I have to repeat one of these because there are people here tonight, I'm sure, that were not on the live stream that we had recently about attacks from these flying creatures, these modern pterosaurs. They occasionally, I have to say, it's only occasionally, of the hundreds of reports I've received, only about less, like 1% at the most, 1% of the reports I received have any indication that the animal was either attempting an attack or diving toward a possible attack on person, called it off and flew over the person, or if it actually continued trying to catch the person. I'll give you an example. And these are rare, but they're important enough, incredible enough. I think they're important. We need to realize that there is some danger. It's not as dangerous as a rabid raccoon that has rabies or anything like that. There's other dangers that we have in North America, but there is some danger. This was in western Oklahoma. I don't have the paper in front of me, I don't think. But it was quite a few years ago. It was not in the last 10 years. It was quite a few years ago. And it was a 4-year-old girl that went out with her brothers and sisters. They were all older than her, and she went with them out to the bus stop, and the bus picked up the older kids, took them to school, and she was walking back to the house. Right around when she got to the chicken coop, something flew down at her. She looked right at it, and it was the size of a Volkswagen Bug, and it was diving toward her. She ducked down to the ground and kept looking at it as it passed over. She said it was covered with hair or fur. I don't remember exactly the way she put that, but it was either hair or fur, and it was diving at her, but it missed because she ducked down to the ground. It missed and made a squawk, flew away. She ran into the house. That was an attack. Of course, a failed attack, fortunately, but she says she's concerned that there, as I understand from her what she said in the email, I believe she's concerned that there may have been at least one child in that area of Oklahoma that went missing because of that flying creature. I have no doubt that it was a modern pterosaur. It had teeth in the beak. It wasn't a big bird. It had teeth in the beak covered with hair, big as a Volkswagen Bug. I mean, I've got a lot of sighting reports about modern pterosaurs that are about that size, mostly ropens. But yeah, there we have reports. Now, actually hurting people in North America, I have indirect reports indicating that some people have died in a certain area of British Columbia in Canada. In fact, I think I have a book here. I can show you the cover of it. Well, I have a bunch of books here I can show you, but this one is particular. Bird from Hell. I think this is a second edition, yeah. Bird from Hell. My associate, I haven't talked to him in a long time. I have to get in touch with him again. It's been years since I've communicated with Gerald McIsaac. I have to remember to get in touch with him. I hope he's okay. And anyway, yeah, they do attack people on this particular area of British Columbia, and they have the Aboriginals, the native people in that area, have their traditions about the dangers. I don't remember if they call it devil bird. I think they call it devil bird or something. And the people just don't go out at night. The native people, the older people originally from that part of Canada, they just don't go out at night because of this flying creature. tell you something I haven't said before. Is it Jeremiah said, have you any Ropen reports come from Australia? Yeah, we do. Oh, yeah, a good number. And they're good reports, too. I have a book called Live Pterosaurs in Australia and in Papua New Guinea. That book, sorry I don't have the URL here, but you can find it by looking up Live Pterosaurs in Australia and in Papua New Guinea by me, Jonathan Whitcomb. You get your mind. For those who are not familiar, I'm getting my name here. It's written by me, but it's free. You can just get it a PDF download from the internet. Don't recall the web page right now. But anyway, it's yeah, we have sighting reports from Australia. But right now, I was going to get into one particular report from British Columbia, where this girl, and I know I mentioned this before, but some people haven't seen that. And we got something Yancey. We need to respond to Yancey here. Does a report have preferred habitat? Like, do you see them flying more in forests, for instance? That's a good question, but I don't have that kind of detail, and there's some complications with sighting reports. I have to mention there are particular reasons why a person will see a modern pterosaur in daytime when humans can see so much better in daylight because we just don't see well at night, and so we usually see a modern pterosaur in daytime. But the reason for a sighting could be something as simple as just a weather storm or something, some other aspect of weather or something that disturbed a ropen that was normally be sleeping in a nest in daytime and is disturbed and so flies off in the daytime, and somebody happens to be there. So even if you could get statistics on whether or not there are more in forests, doesn't necessarily mean much in terms of the animals themselves. That's the challenge. If we had hundreds of thousands of reports and we had lots of volunteers to compile all the information, oh, great. We could learn some things, but we have hundreds rather than hundreds of thousands. Now, we do have many hundreds of thousands of eyewitness sightings. We have perhaps up to 128 million people in the world who've had some kind of encounter with a modern pterosaur. I figured this out. It can't be too much. It can be as low as 7 million, 6 million, but all the encounters that people have worldwide in their whole lifetime and the human lifetimes of all the people that live on the earth, it's absolutely at least 6 or 7 million persons. That includes, though, the sightings that are not very good. I mean, when it's just a little flyby that you hardly notice, that's unfortunately, that's including those, which is not really very helpful at all. Okay, and here's do you provide a list of your books somewhere, perhaps by way of a website? Oh yeah, I've published over 1,000 websites and blog posts over the years, and some of them do list my books. One of them, the most recent book that I have here, is for older children and younger teenagers, The Girl Who Saw a Flying Dinosaur. This is available on Amazon and other places, the other books, online bookstores, and this is very popular, very well liked. Live Pterosaurs in America. This is the 3rd edition. Yes, this one I wrote a number of years ago. It's not been revised in recent years, but it's extremely popular. You get those all over online. Okay. And His WordisLife, the Ropen my husband and I saw was in the late afternoon, but it was daylight. Yeah. People see so much better in daytime, and nocturnal animals they do come out in daytime. And since I've been investigating this for the last 17 and a half years, I have had 2 sightings in the daytime of a large owl, 2 different parts of the United States. I recall, I don't remember the second sighting, but 2 sightings. And it was a large owl that is normally nocturnal, So nocturnal animals do come out in the daytime sometimes. Okay, Yancey says, have you talked to that Australian couple since the time you went on expedition? Yeah, I first started communicating with them either right before the expedition. I think it was right before my expedition in 2004. I communicated some with them then, and then right after my expedition, I did communicate more with them. But that's Perth, Australia. It's on the west coast of Australia. Perth. Remember, that's a very important sighting. Two persons, it's a husband and wife, saw that, and the husband, is a scientist. I mean, at least he works in a scientific field, and he talks exactly like a scientist would in analyzing what he saw with the dimensions. Very scientific in his communications with me. I would call him a scientist. I'm a scientist, and I can tell when they're that precise. And you don't have to be a scientist to recognize that kind of language. But anyway, Jose Romero, it's great to have you here. Thanks for creating this page. Thank you very much for being here. These live streams will be continuing on, I hope, for indefinitely, and I'll start about 4:30 if I can by that time, or 4:45 in the afternoon. That's Mountain Time. So 4:30 Mountain Time is 6:30 Eastern Time in the United States, and it would be 3:30 in the afternoon at California, Washington State, and Oregon. So, where were we? Did I lose track of something important? We were talking about Perth. We're going on in different directions, but Perth sighting is important in 1997 because when is a husband and wife. The husband didn't want to talk to anybody about it. Didn't want to tell anybody. Just let it be. And his wife, and I can't reveal their names. It's personal, private. They're anonymous, but I promise you, I guarantee that these are real persons. These are two real persons who they lived in Perth at the time. I was communicating with them since then. They've moved from Perth, but they're real people. I believe them too. But she put this on some kind of a 1997. That was a long time ago. She put a report of what she saw in some kind of online forum, some internet forum, and she was immediately criticized being a liar. She was upset with that. She'd been brought up to tell the truth, and she was telling the truth. And she was upset that somebody was accusing her of lying. Well, it's extraordinary what she saw. Her husband, the scientist, estimated the wingspan was between 30 feet and 50 feet. It's 30 feet and 50 feet. And he thought about it and said he had a feeling that it was closer to the bigger size, closer to 50 feet. And that's the scientist, But it was extremely large. And it was lizard-like, was her first impression of it. And Jeremiah says, would you speculate that there are ropens that have reported to show hair, that the hair is sparse for sensing barometric changes or more like fur for warmth? Good question. I'd like to know myself. I'll get more information, get more about it. Remember the girl that was 4 years old when she was attacked in western Oklahoma? She said it was covered with fur or hair. So this very hairy, furry type of covering. And I don't usually get that kind of, it's more like sparse hair. But anyway, yeah, it's something to look for in future research to get more information about it. And there are more than one species, unfortunately, and people have different ways that they see these flying creatures, some of them close, some far. And people, when they have a sighting of something that's astonishing, they will concentrate on probably one, maybe two details of what they see on it. They'll see something flying, and they're and they might concentrate on the head with that long, horn-like head crest at the back of the head. They don't usually say head crest, but I know that's what we call them. But that horn at the back of the head. And sometimes they'll say it's like a similar angle. I call this American hammerhead ropen. That's what I call this. It's very common in North America, very common. Not everybody describes it that way, but it has that angle that gives them a feeling like a hammerhead. Anyway, His WordisLife is the hair only on the body of the ropen I saw had leather-like wings like a bat. The wings had no hair. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean they didn't have any hair unless you're really close. And I don't recall, you might have told us about your sighting, His WordisLife, as I'm talking about. But how can you estimate about how far away it was? Was it like, I mean, it was close if it was like 10 to 25 feet, but if it was 100 feet, then we wouldn't consider that really close, but it's medium distance away. But that makes a difference on whether or not a person can see hair on the flying creature. It makes a difference. For example, if you ever go out to a beach in the summer and you see a lot of people on the beach, I'm from California originally. If you look for it and look for hair on the people's arms at a distance, you won't see any hair. You'll say, well, it's just leather-like. It's just naked skin that people have on their arms. No hair on the arms. For me, you might almost say that for my head, but it's you can't see the hair on my arm. Well, you can see it now, see. But you notice how close I am to the camera? Just, less than 2 feet away. See, it's hair. As you get further away, you notice this is just 2.5, 3 feet away. You notice as I'm getting further and further away, it has a little bit darker appearance. Now I'm just looking from what I see on my computer monitor, so maybe you can see it better. But as you get further and further away, like maybe 10 feet, 20 feet, the hair disappears on the human arm. So, His WordisLife Too close. Yeah, I understand. It's possible you may have seen a pterosaur that had very little hair and very sparse hair, so that you really wouldn't, especially if it was flying, you wouldn't notice it. It's a light hair, sparse hair. You wouldn't notice it. You're probably looking at other things and just overwhelmed by the things that let you know that it was a pterodactyl. That's natural. I wouldn't expect you to be looking for something like hair. Now, we have to understand that the critics that say, can't be a pterosaur. Pterosaurs are covered in hair. Well, that's nonsense for several reasons. It's nonsense because of a number of reasons. For one is, how can paleontologists don't generally say this because they know that it's full of holes. They can't say that. But people that are trying to defend popular ideas in paleontology, but they're not paleontologists themselves, they'll say, it can't be a pterodactyl. Pterodactyls have hair. They're covered with hair. Well, no. That no paleontologists that I know of, and especially not the really good ones, the well-known ones that have published books and so on, as far as I know, they never say, all pterosaurs must have had a lot of hair. They will not say that. And even if it was true, they would never just assume that if a species had survived for all the time from the times of fossils up until the present, that it couldn't possibly change in any way, That's ridiculous. We have so many species of breeds, we have so many breeds of dogs, for example. How can you say that a Chihuahua is the same kind of animal as a Great Dane or a large dog? And how can you say a hairless dog is the same species as a dog that's just covered with one of those that are just covered with hair, just hairy. How can they be the same species? Well, they are. Size, regardless. Amount of hair, regardless. Those are the same species, all dogs. They can interbreed, but they have vastly different characteristics in terms of hair and so on. To say that a pterodactyl, a pterosaur, is a proper word. If a pterosaur that lived in the past and is known from fossils had hair in general, they did have hair in general, yeah. Pycnofibers, what they call them, had hair. But the point is, who's going to say that because of hair that a scientist has seen in a magnifying glass or in a microscope with a fossil, that scientist is looking at, very carefully and examining for a long period of time, hair. Yeah, but of course he wouldn't say hair, it'd be pycnofiber, whatever. And he sees it after that. And then a person that's outside somewhere, maybe a same neighborhood as that laboratory the scientist is in, he sees a pterodactyl flying by, and he won't see any hairs. There's a leathery skin. It means nothing in terms of the credibility of the sighting report. Absolutely nothing. No scientist is going to say, oh, pterosaurs of the past had hair, so if any flying creature doesn't have hair, then it can't be a pterosaur. They never would say anything. It's people that are amateurs that really don't know what they're talking about, that use that as if it disproves modern pterosaurs. Now I'm going to have to get up. I missed some of the chat here. Okay. Mary Land, thank you for joining us here. Mary Land, what temperatures do you think they can live in, since they are seen in somewhat colder areas like North America? I guess their travel distance can be extensive. Yes. We have many sightings at different times of year, some of them in very cold weather. And generally, pterosaurs are thought of by scientists, paleontologists, to be, I believe, at least generally, warm-blooded, as far as I know. They're warm-blooded creatures. We have, of course, small cold-blooded creatures, amphibians in Canada, for example. Canada is not devoid of amphibians and things like that, just because of winters that are so harsh there. They have different ways that the amphibian may be able to survive and even freeze and still be revised and still live. And the bears hibernate, of course, those bears that hibernate in Canada, and different ways of adapting. But we do have sighting reports in very cold weather in North America sometimes. Yeah. His WordisLife. I was probably assuming there was no hair on the wings because there was no feathers, and all I know is the wings looked bat-like. Yeah. Sharp, clear angles on the edges of the wings. Oh, I absolutely believe you. I believe you. Somebody else was with you at the time, if I remember. Yeah, you saw a pterosaur, no doubt. However, keep in mind that the bats also look hairless sometimes, but they have a small amount of hair. Somebody, you just don't notice it. And Jeremiah, I would differentiate between species and kind. All dogs, wolves are the same kind, the canine kind, whereas differing species exist within that same kind. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I was throwing that out as an example of dogs can look so different from each other, and they're all different breeds of the same kind. Yeah, it's just that you have to watch out for these attacks. And there's also the situation with, we've dealt with that enough. They're saying that these sighting reports of modern pterosaurs cannot be pterosaurs because they don't have hair is nonsense. Remember, I was telling you about another reason is I was telling you about the scientist in Perth, Australia in 1997. Well, I know I might be repeating myself on this, but do you know what he said when he talked to me, communicated with me? He said, as it got closer, and there was a sports stadium there lighting up the creature so that they got the light coming from those big lights in the sports stadium showing on the animals that was flying. He could see that part of the body of the creature was different, as if it might have had perhaps very fine, thin hair, or perhaps scales, he said. But he admitted the possibility that there could have been hair on that part of the body or wings, whatever he was talking about at the time. Some hair, but it was quite a long distance away, but that was a huge animal. But anyway, yeah, this thing that presence or absence of hair as being a way to discredit eyewitness sightings and sighting reports is absolute nonsense for a number of different reasons. Okay, and I think we've probably spent enough time on that. We actually have other reports in North America where a person has had seen the hair on the creature. For example, let's get back to this, where you see this sketch here by Eskin Kun, the U.S. Marine that was at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba in 1971. and had an extraordinary sighting in the middle of the day, clear weather, no, good visibility, close in range. He was on the shore, close in range. Unfortunately, nobody was with him, but he was a talented artist, fortunately, and was able to, within minutes, get us paper and pencil and sketch out what he had seen. But he said that originally his first sketch, before they had done photocopying and so on, he did put the hair on the end of the tail, at that structure at the end of the tail, because it did have hair on that flange at the end of the tail. But unfortunately, over a period of time, as it got a photocopy of a photocopy, that detail has been lost in the image we have now. But I just tell you what Eskin Kun has communicated to me about. It did have hair on the end of the tail. And I have other eyewitnesses in North America who do report the presence of hair. And of course, we've already talked about this. For a 4-year-old girl that was almost killed by this animal in western Oklahoma years ago. Fortunately, dived down and didn't get touched by it. Was able to run into the house, but that was covered in hair, fur, whatever it was. There is a difference between hair and fur. I don't remember what it is offhand, but there is a difference, and it has to do with the biology of the structures. But whatever, this is not a point to really pay any attention to critics that say that discredits the eyewitness accounts. Nothing remotely like that. Nothing remotely like that. And of course, obviously, it doesn't discredit the accounts that people have when they see hair on the animal and they report hair on the pterodactyl. So don't feel bad if you've had a sighting and you didn't see hair. That's okay. It doesn't mean anything. So let's get back to the chat. I hope I didn't miss anything. Yeah, Jeremiah says, I would differentiate. Yeah, we've had that about the dogs and the different kinds. Yeah. We do have occasionally, I will get a report. Well, when you're just talking about statistics, it would be a, what's the name of it called in statistics? The outlier. There is occasionally an outlier, something that's very different. For example, on the estimate of the size, the wingspan may be way out there. But still, we might also have something unusual like coloring. Like in Texas once, this little boy was in his backyard and he was alone. And this flying creature came down and was hovering above him. And he drew a crude sketch of it later, and with coloring crayons, I guess. And it was a striped, sort of striped-like appearance of orange and black. Now that is unusual. That could be a very rare species. I don't see anything in his description or his communication with me that would cause me to doubt his credibility, that he was greatly mistaken or dishonest or anything like that. It's an outlier, so I don't mention that very often. The outliers I don't usually talk about as much because it's more difficult to deal with. But actually, interesting to note, statistically, in the size estimates of the reports that I publish, which are almost all of the sightings, there's no outlier. That sighting report by the Perth couple in Australia in 1997 is very large, between 30 feet and 40 and 50 feet. It's still not quite an outlier. It actually makes sense in terms of the other very large sizes. And it's a very even range. Now, getting back to some of these early criticisms we have, I think I don't think I've talked enough about this in previous live streams that we've had. One of them came about, and I have to tell you, I made a mistake. I probably should never have gotten into this, but I started getting so many of these attacks about dishonesty, people are lying, that actually one person said once, he said, he was talking about pollination. One of my associates had been on expeditions searching and had wonderful success in 2000. 2006, late in 2006 in the mainland of Papua New Guinea. Oh, it's a wonderful success videotaping these two bioluminescent things that flew down and landed on the top of a ridge. We'll talk about that sometime. Wonderful success in that expedition. But one critic, he says, I don't trust. Let me get here to my name so you get this. I don't trust pollination because he's connected with Jonathan Whitcomb. Ooh, he's connected with Whitcomb. You mean he's actually a friend to Whitcomb? Oh, ooh, what horrible. But it was about that time when I decided I'm going to take a different tack on this. I have so many hundreds of web pages and blog posts that I write and publish online. I'm going to take a different tack. People are distrusting the reports because of my name. So I got a pseudonym, a pen name, and I used it to write about, but I did it in a careful way, not to be dishonest or anything, but I used a pen name, which is perfectly legitimate for certain reasons. People have been doing this for generations. Writers have been doing this for hundreds of years. I used a pen name, and I started writing about these sighting reports and so on. And so I did that for a while, and then I took another pen name, and I was doing the same thing so that people could see the reports without seeing my name, so that they couldn't use my name as an excuse to just dismiss the reports. Because some people were saying that I was behind all these things. Jonathan Whitcomb is behind all reports of modern pterosaurs or pterodactyls that are not extinct. He's behind all this. So you can just dismiss him and you dismiss all the reports, because he's behind it. Well, so I started using those names, and eventually I got to the point where I thought I better stop this, and just because I think it might have been changing. Not as many people were accusing us of dishonesty. I think it might have been that. Whatever reason, I decided to stop it, and I told people that those names, Nathaniel Coleman and some other name, those names are just pseudonyms. It actually was me writing that because I wanted to get the truth out without revealing my name, so that people would just pay attention to the eyewitness sighting reports, not my name. And very soon I got this response from this young lady who was practically anonymous. She wouldn't give out her real name, but she says, I'm so wrong and dishonest, doing something so bad, is to use a pen name, And she was using a pen name herself. What kind of evidence is that for dishonesty? She's using a pen name. I revealed my real name eventually, and she never did, as far as I know. As far as I know, she still uses a pen name. I don't know if she's ever retracted that statement that I was, doing something very bad and having a pen name and reporting things. Anyway, Jeremiah says, where can we see this video of bioluminescence? Good question. There's a number of places you can get it, but you have to know that to use the word in quotes in a search engine, pollination, N-A-T-I-O-N, pollination, video, for example, glowing, wait a minute, the name they have there. Can I do a search real quick while I'm talking here? Let me look up Indava. I-N-D-A-V-A. And I'll type in pollination. See what we get here. Indava Bird Project. Okay, I'll give you the URL here. indavabird.com. INDAVABIRD.com. And it goes into here. I don't know if that actually has the video on there. I have some still images. I don't have them in front of me because this is not about bioluminescence in this particular live stream tonight. We had that not many weeks ago, but we can talk about it. You should be able to find it if you search for it. It's very few seconds, and it doesn't show any form or features. Be aware of this. There was a scientific paper that was not published in a journal or anything like that, but it was written, a very detailed, well done scientific paper. I've done my own writings, putting it in clear English so that you can, if you're not a scientist, you can understand what it is. And I put my own words to it in explaining what Clifford Piva was talking about. He's a physicist. Incredible things he learned from the video footage. Incredible things. He could determine, for example, absolutely it was not from car headlights or from a electric torch, the British would call it, or what we American call a flashlight, nothing like that, not from a candle, not from a not from a campfire, not from airplane lights, not from meteors, nothing like that. It just totally different from those things. It was a very strange light, and there are two of them that came down and landed on top of a ridge in the mainland of New Guinea. Now let's get to some more questions here. Do all pterodactyls have tails? No, they do not. Modern pterosaurs, you can divide into the long tails and the no long tails, or maybe an absence or very little tail. They're different. The Ropen is a long-tailed pterosaur. We do have so many of the other ones that we can say that there's not just, I don't think it could be called any kind of a weakness in observation. The eyewitness just missed the tail. It's not that. There's just too many of them. Too many eyewitnesses are positive they didn't see a tail. Now, if it's at night, I take that with a grain of salt. At night, it's possible to see a modern pterosaur flying and not notice a tail because it can be thin. And being thin, it might not be noticed. But we have daytime sightings where the person's sure it didn't have a long tail, or they saw a tail, but it was really shorter than I would feel comfortable calling it a Ropen. It's just too short. And there's enough of those, and especially, for example, I'll give you an example, okay? New Britain Island. If you want to look up New Britain Island in Papua New Guinea, I saw it from a distance when I was on the ship on the way to Umboy Island in 2004, but I never went to New Britain myself. I just saw it from a distance, the shoreline. It's a very big island, much bigger than Umboy, huge. And in the central part inland of that island, more to the western side, there's an area where a number of Americans have consistently seen, over a period of many years, have seen an apparent pterosaur that just does not have a long tail. It just doesn't. Too many daytime sightings in those reports with the absence of a tail for me to just dismiss it and say they just missed the tail, they didn't see the tail. No, it didn't have a tail. It's not the same species. It's not a Ropen. In fact, other things would suggest that too. They're seen more in daylight than the Ropen is. Sometimes they're seen flying, coasting down in daylight together, a number of them together. That's not like a Ropen at all. 2 or 3 together, gliding down over a ravine or canyon in the middle of the day, or at least in the middle of the morning, toward the coast. The Ropens don't do that. They don't fly in groups of 3 gliding down together in daylight anywhere. That's not a Ropen. If they do it, it's extremely exceptional. Now, we do have a report in Los Angeles that is different, but that's a different part of the world. But they are definitely the other kind that are not Ropens, no doubt. So let's see. Did I miss something there with pollination? He had a number of sightings. It's difficult terrain. I don't recommend people going off to New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, to search for modern pterosaurs, unless you're a native who already lives there and you know the people, and you can go out on a very low cost basis, and we can support you financially. That's different. But generally, if you want to do anything like that, searching for a modern pterosaur, stay where you are and see what you can find out about your own area. For example, myself, my wife and I have interviewed a number of eyewitnesses in Utah, just miles from where we live, some of them. Some of them is what's over 100 miles with some of them, but there are sighting reports all over North America, all over the United States. We're running out of states where we don't have an eyewitness reporting to me a sighting. Not many states left. I believe North Dakota, South Dakota, I haven't received a sighting report, but there's very few people living there, and that's so remote, and possibly the few that do see a modern pterosaur, maybe that's just their personality and their culture of North Dakota and South Dakota, perhaps, that they don't tell outsiders about seeing something weird that they'll get somebody making fun of them. North Dakota, whoa, you have so many sightings. California, dozens of sightings. Texas, so many sightings. But generally we have to be careful of sighting reports in particular areas thinking that it has something to do with how many animals are there. No. It's far more complicated and difficult than people would imagine. For example, if you take into account the population of a state in the United States, and you say how many sightings are there per million or 6 million or so inhabitants of the state, you have some states that just look like it. Wow, look at they have so many sightings in relation to human populations. Utah is one of the top. Kansas even top of that. Hawaii is way above that. Kansas, wow, you must have so many sightings in Kansas. No, that's in proportion to the human population. The actual number of sightings that have been reported to me over many years from Kansas, it's a lot more than 3 or 4, but it's not many. It's nothing remotely close to like California. But it shows that there perhaps people in Kansas are more likely to talk about it. I don't think it's necessarily that there are more animals there, but then maybe they don't have as many hiding places. Maybe Kansasans or whatever people in Kansas are more open to report things to me, possibly. So we have Ropens reported all over the world. And I may have mentioned this in England, but there are, just a few years ago, we had 2 sighting reports that I received from 2 different families. They don't know each other, but they're both in Shropshire, England. Shropshire is, it's a little bit sort of northeast of Wales. It's in kind of the central part of England. But those were extraordinary sightings. We can get into that more sometime. But they're the same year, but it wasn't the same part of Shropshire, but it was in that same part of England. Now, if they are bioluminescent, that would come in handy for flying at night and attracting bugs like a bug zapper. I have read they like to skim bugs out of the air above the water. Well, I haven't heard that. I know, I said, of course it's possible. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, of course. It's possible if they're small pterosaurs that are bioluminescent. Of course, you can glow, but the way that they're flying when they go right over the water would suggest to me more like catching fish than catching insects. According to what was reported to me over the Yakima River in southeastern Washington state a number of years ago, the way that they were flying suggests they were catching fish, I think. There's some places where they may be catching bats, and the bats are attracted to light. That's true. I have a theory on that, on the Rhamphorhynchoids in southern Texas. And we've gone over that on the other live stream where we talked about bioluminescence. And that's indirectly related to insects. In that case, I suspect that certain times they get warmer weather in the summer in Texas, that the bioluminescence of these flying creatures, which could very well be ropens, they could be modern pterosaurs, I don't know for sure, I'm just saying they might be. But apparently they're glowing creatures that fly together, and they have certain patterns of how they act, which I believe at that time of year is to attract insects, which attract the big brown bat, which is it's a bat. Okay, I don't remember the scientific word exactly, but it's a bat that's common in that part of the country, in Texas, and apparently, as far as I can tell, the flying creatures, which could be pterosaurs, but they glow in such a way that they attract the insects, and then one flying creature will leave, and then the bats probably will come closer to catch the insects, and then that's when the other flying creature will come and turn off its light, at least sometimes turn off the light and come flying in and catch a bat. It's too much energy, too much work to catch insects that way, but you can catch a bat. It's at least a snack. That's different. But other times of year, they will act differently. The flying creatures will act differently in the Marfa, Texas area. And they will, when it's colder, they will not do that dividing of the light and then one coming back. They will not do that. I think it's because of the bats and the insects. That's my conjecture, as you call it. So, okay. What's the time? We've been here close to an hour and a half. Let's keep going because we have people here. Let's see what we can find out about the people that are here. Live stream. Okay. Got a good number, about the usual. A few people being with us here. We probably could keep on going with bioluminescence. You know, I was looking today at some YouTube documentary about glowing mushrooms, and that's incredible. One person that's researched this for a long time, he says he can actually get one of these mushrooms at night. He can get it on a stick and carry it around with him without any other light, and he actually can see his way around. I didn't know it was that bright. Apparently this one particular mushroom is bright enough that you can actually use it to see with. Of course, your eyes have to adjust to the dark, I suspect, but taking it around with him on a stick, and it's like a natural flashlight, mushroom flashlight. But the Ropen, and we don't know if all of them have this capacity to do this, but at least some of them have the capacity to choose when they start producing light. Not all of them can choose when to stop. If there's the complexity here, we need to talk about it if you want to get into it. And this is what wide gauge says: that ultraviolet wavelengths of light are most likely to attract bugs. Well, thank you. I didn't think about that. Ultraviolet wavelengths of light. And Yancey says, when was the last expedition to find the Ropen? Well, it's just a few months ago we had Rex Yappy on Umboy Island, and he was trying. He was really trying. He had a group of men with him, and he has his own channel, too. I don't remember. It might be his own name, Rex Yappy, if you want to look for that in YouTube. Rex Yappy's videos, interesting. I recommend them, though it doesn't have any images of the Ropen, unfortunately. But unfortunately, he has to go back to supporting himself and his family, and he hasn't been getting the funds from the United States like he needed. And I hope that can be remedied before long, that we can get a non-profit organization started where we can have an organized way of financing expeditions like this. And I really hope to do this, but I have to get my own finances in order to help much on that. I'm struggling myself. Neither of my two YouTube video channels have yet been monetized. I have to be honest, they're not yet monetized, and I have two of them. You can look at a lot of videos, and it helps if you just watch videos on this channel, Protect Animal Life. That will help indirectly in a little bit to help us get along so that we can get expeditions financed. You don't have to do anything but just watch the videos and recommend other people to watch the videos. This is Protect Animal Life that we're on now. The other channel on YouTube that I've been working on in the last few weeks is just my name, Jonathan Whitcomb. That's the channel name. And it has an extraordinary video. It has 1/3 views. That's a sighting by Dwayne Hodgkinson and his army buddy in 1944 on the mainland of New Guinea, just west of Finchhaven. That is an interesting account. And you can see his own testimony, how he talks about that with the interviewer, who is my associate, Garth Guessman. Fascinating. I was delighted with how well Garth recorded that interview. It's gorgeous. I was delighted to edit it and put it together in a production that's got so much success on YouTube. So there are other channels. I recommend a number of channels about modern pterosaurs. So be careful. There's one of particular channel that just has a video. It's very, very negative and ignorant. It's a person that's not revealed his name, and I won't mention his name. I won't mention the name of the channel. Beware. It has a lot of things about me that are totally false and totally nonsense, and just rumors that people. Sometimes some people on the internet, if they get a rumor that says it shows somebody's bad, and done something wrong and is totally foolish, they'll promote that and tell other people about it just as if it was fact, because it makes somebody look bad and foolish, so they just treat it like it's fact. It's absolute nonsense. And some of it that's not absolute nonsense is just half-truths and distorted truths and just not helpful at all. And one of them in that channel, of that video on that channel, is about hair. Pterosaurs had hair. So obviously these can't be modern pterosaurs. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Nonsense. But here we have, again, are we not to get into the sighting by Eskin Kun. This has helped us a lot in seeing the different structures of the animal, and also in, let me get this done. This one by Patty Carson, and I believe it's the same species. I call it the American hammerhead ropen. And this is, I'm not saying that all ropens in North America are much like this. There could be more than one species, I don't know. Possibly the reason people don't report it in this detail about that, well, you can see it right here, about that curve of the horn of the back of the head crest, and that extended curve, perhaps a little bit into the beak, is because of just eyewitness weakness, eyewitness error. Eyewitness maybe wasn't concentrating so much on that detail, or maybe they didn't see it from an angle that would make it easy. As far as I know, it's possible that the great majority of ropen sightings in North America are the same species. I don't know. Not all of them are, I don't think. But possible a great majority of them could be the same species. So let's get back. We need to get back to the chat here. Here's an idea. Open a hotline where folks can call in to record their encounter story. I'll give you voice content. It'll give you voice content for videos. A hotline. Well, that would be nice. That would be an idea to go with. Can you remind me of that? All right, I need to write it down here. Let me write it down. Hotline. See, when we get a nonprofit organization started, then we can do things like that. We can have somebody, pay somebody to be on a telephone. That would be great. When my husband and I saw the pterodactyl, this is from His WordisLife, he told me not to report it to anyone, even though I felt an enormous responsibility to do so. I worried that it might hurt people and it was very dangerous. Yes, sometimes the probability of a particular animal that you see being dangerous is not necessarily very high, but in general there might be a big one that is dangerous. I can't tell. I don't have enough information on the one you saw, but potentially could be dangerous. What happens when you call the police? Well, I can tell you that. I've experienced going to a police station. That is very difficult to do anything with a sheriff's office or a police department. First of all, how this is Western culture. We just assume that thing is impossible. It couldn't be what you think it was. And unless somebody's actually died or missing, what are the police going to do? Yeah, so let's see. So let's continue here about this part of the danger. The best thing we can do is just tell people about this channel, Protect Animal Life. I've organized this channel not just to protect animals. Hey, octopus with no friends. Hey, good to have you here. Right. Great to have you here. Back again. Yeah, it's also people, I don't consider people animals, but, we want to protect people too. And if we have knowledge of these flying creatures, that protects people and the animals, because we can learn what we need to do to protect people and get the word out, and also learn about the animals, find out more about them. Knowledge is there's so much potential power that can come with knowledge, not automatically, but it can be a start to getting power to learn and to grow and to do things with knowledge. Is there a better resource to report a sighting? Report it to me. I would recommend myself. There are lots of places you could, but as far as I know, I have more experience in this than any other person on the face of the earth. Years ago, I passed the 10,000 hour mark for the amount of time I've spent on this narrow field of investigation. Doesn't mean that I'm right more than somebody else. It doesn't mean that I have better ideas than one or more of my associates have. It doesn't mean that. Or that I'm always objective. It doesn't mean that either. It's just that I have a much larger base to use information from. I have a lot more reports, a lot more experience, and I know what's going on in different parts of the world and what people have seen in different parts of the world. So I recommend going to me with your report. Here's the URL. You don't necessarily have to write down all these letters for the URL here. You can find me by my name and pterodactyl and email, a form, whatever, by different kinds of searches. You can go to the description area. For example, if you're on a computer or desktop computer, for example, it's fairly easy to, after this video or another video is published on YouTube, you go to the description area underneath the video, and you'll see the link. You can click on the link to send me an email. I'll tell you what happens. You'll get to a form, a very simple form. You just put your name and email address. I don't remember exactly what it's about. It's very simple. And a brief message. You don't have to write very much information there if you don't want to. Because when you send that, I'll get the email. Then I can send an email to you, and we can just communicate by emails directly after that. Only one time do you need to use that form. And it's easy form. Simple. So highly recommend you contact me. I really appreciate it. And okay, now I've missed some things. I have to get to this because I missed some things that were just communicated here. Okay, his word is life. Then the one I saw was very large. His body, not including the head or feet, were 1.5 times the size of my husband at 6'2". Yeah, that's a good size. Wide gauge. He has a web form to fill out and submit. It'll email him. Yeah. I did report it to you, but not while that was happening. My sighting happened years ago. Well, that's okay. No problem. Most of the reports I get were not from encounters that happened within the last 48 hours or so. Some of them are months ago, some of them years ago, some of them are decades ago. I get sighting reports from all different times after they happened. There's no problem at all. Except, of course, over time, what happens with the human memory, is we do have a tendency of holding on to a memory in a way that it might become somewhat distorted or something may be lost in the process of time. That happens unless you had such a shocking encounter that certain things were just ingrained, and you saw the animal there flying and it was engraved into your memory, that long tail with something at the end of the tail, and you might have seen the feet separate from the tail, and you thought, that is not a bird, but unfortunately, over a period of time, if you don't report it and don't write it down, it's possible for certain detail to become distorted. However, I did some research on this a few years ago. The presence of a long tail or absence of a long tail is not something that is distorted so much by time. In other words, if you saw something 10 years ago, it was a pterodactyl, a Ropen, a pterodactyl with a long tail, and you saw that long tail, you didn't report it to anybody until just this year, and it's 10 years ago, your memory of that detail is not so likely to be distorted very much, not significantly. I did a research on this. I don't remember all the details, but I did come to the conclusion that that kind of detail, a long tail, is not much distorted by years of time going by. But other things could be, of course, because we're human and memory is not perfect. I did record it. Okay, got that. But we have to be aware of the critic that says, oh, human memory is bad. People don't see well and they don't remember male swords. You just dismiss these sightings of modern pterosaurs. That's nonsense. That's not the proper way to address the situation. The person who has not seen a pterosaur but just is just throwing out sightings and rejecting everybody that says they have, that person is actually an eyewitness of something they created in the imagination. They've witnessed an idea in the imagination, and they're reporting to us what they've seen in the imagination. Do you notice something there? It's not reality. That was not something that was seen by the eyes. It's in the imagination. A concept, an idea of universal extinction of all species of pterosaurs. That's in the imagination. It's an idea. When you see that, there's not much credibility in that. No, unless you can see some scientific reason, really. You need to remember, people need to remember, where did Western science come from? From people observing something. They see something, they try to explain it. Then they try to make more observations and they test out things and so on. That's Western science. Observation is critical, absolutely critical, to the real true origin of science. People forget that, and they think, oh, you can imagine something, and then you put it down in the science textbook, and that's science. The scientists say that's it. They imagine it, and they write about it, and they write about it again, and they keep repeating it to themselves, repeating the same thing, and it's all from the imagination, not from something that people see with their eyes. Okay. Wide Gaze, good to see witnesses drop into the chat and share. Absolutely. I am delighted. And this here, I also heard it land in the brush, so then I knew it was true. Plus my husband saw it. I did see the huge thing. I sort of wish I didn't see it. Well, I can understand that. Yeah, there's challenges that are involved when you have a sighting of a modern pterosaur in a Western country like the United States. And a lot of sightings are in the United States. It's a challenge. It's a special problem that people have with that because it's ingrained into our nature that they're extinct. Oh, is it ingrained? Ooh. I mean, I've been researching this for close to 18 years, and I've spent more time on this than any other person on the face of the earth. Pretty sure. And yet still, there are moments when I might consider what this means, and I think, wow, what have I gotten into? These animals are real. They're all over the earth almost. They're real, and it's, wow. It's not shocking to me, but it is still, I'm trying to recover from the shock that I had years ago. Still trying to totally recover from it. Oh, it is incredible because of our culture, you know, what we're raised in. And KJ, thank you for joining us, KJ. Do you think the legendary Tombstone Thunderbird photo could have been a pterosaur? Well, that's a complex question here. I'll have to look into this. A Tombstone Thunderbird photo. Well, the Tombstone Epitaph newspaper, if that's what we're referring to, I have to be careful about our terminology and our ideas here. The Tombstone Epitaph, as I recall, was a newspaper back that existed in that little town of Tombstone, Arizona in the late 1800s. And at that time, they did not have, at that newspaper, they did not have any ability to print photos or images or sketches or anything except the printed words. In other words, just very simple printing press that just printed words, put the letters together and it makes words. That's what they printed there in their newspaper. So there is, if you're referring to the Tombstone story from the late 1800s about this pterodactyl that was shot down by cowboys, and that's usually what people are thinking of. There was no photo in the newspaper. And the newspaper article itself is suspect because it's probably, the best you can say about it, I'm afraid, is that it was greatly distorted. From one reported eyewitness years later that said they didn't actually shoot it. It didn't fall down. They didn't actually get to it. The horses were scared, and they had a hard time trying to get the horses to follow it. And the men that were on the horses were not that anxious to catch up with it. So when they shot it, they missed, in other words. And he said it wasn't really like what it said in the newspapers. I'm not surprised. I should tell you something that I learned from a recent generation. About just a few decades ago, my wife and I were driving down downtown Pasadena, California, close to the Colorado Boulevard, where they have the Rose Parade every year, or at least they used to have the Rose Parade every year. And we heard something like, I recognize as gunshots. It's not car backfiring, bang, 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 but that's not car backfiring. It's like gunfire. We looked out, and for a long story short, we followed a man that we believed that was the one that shot somebody else, or at somebody else, and we followed him, and we tried to remember what it looked like. We followed the car. We got with the police and talked to the police, and it turned out that was the number one suspect, the one that we were following. And it was murder, manslaughter at least. Anyway, went to trial and so on. After all was done, what it turned out to be, in the newspapers the next day, they reported this. Of course, there's a body in the gutter, on Colorado Boulevard, right down the street from the city hall and the police department. The body's there, and it's in the newspapers. What did they think they said in the newspaper? What we reported to the police was what happened is we followed this man who got in the car. We followed the car, and the man in the car, they drove away and so on. And the newspaper says they drove away slowly. The newspaper talked about this heavy-set woman that ran away from the scene and drove off in a Ferrari. Nothing remotely like what we reported. But they might have been truthful, but it's not relevant. Perhaps the police didn't want that detail to be in the newspaper, so they didn't tell the newspaper about that detail because it was a little bit too much of the truth. And now, so they told something else that was not so relevant. It was an eyewitness that was scared and got out of the way. Okay, I need to get back here to some more relevant things here. Wide gauge, that huge creature really possesses a danger in my IMO. Not that I can confirm. Yeah, it was probably a very large pterosaur. And I asked my husband, what is that? And he said he didn't know. I said, it's a pterodactyl. And he said, it can't be. Those have been extinct for thousands of years. I said, but we are looking at one. Yeah, I understand. Wide gauge. I recommend Whitcomb's book, Searching for Ropens, if anyone wants an offline record of encounters full of info. Yeah. Well, it's the largest book, as far as I know, about these flying creatures. It's the biggest book in the world. I understand not everybody likes it because they think, oh, it's about religion, searching for ropens and finding God. I don't want religion. I just want cryptozoology. Well, about 95% of the book is cryptozoology, something like that. It's not much about religion, but there is a little bit in certain pages. But anyway, that's the biggest book, and it has the most sighting reports. You can learn a lot from that book. 300-something pages, I don't recall. But yeah, the original edition was just searching for ropens. That's my phone. My wife will get it. And then in recent editions, including the 4th edition a few years ago, that's searching for ropens and finding God. And I recommend it, of course. It's my own book. But thank you for a wide gauge for bringing that up. I have other books here too. Earlier we saw the Bird from Hell. I didn't write this. This one is by Mackay. It's not well written in the sense of a nonfiction book writing. Not the best quality of writing, but it's interesting accounts. And it has some other things about cryptozoology that are not related to pterodactyls. Of course, my book, The Live Pterosaurs in America, which I wrote, this one is quite a few years ago, but it's the 3rd edition. Very, very popular as far as people recommending it. And then, of course, my recent one, The Girl Who Saw a Flying Dinosaur. It's a short book for older children and younger teenagers. And then this one, which is by Ken Gerhardt, which has sightings mainly in Texas. Not too much except in Texas, but it's got some interesting accounts here. You can find some things here that you won't find too much in such detail in my books. But it is kind of restricted, Texas. So, and there are other books too. I'm looking at my bookshelf here. Bunches of books where part of the book tells you something, maybe just one page, tells you about sighting reports of modern pterosaurs. Many books that you can find. Well, KJ, I greatly enjoyed your recent video on Pennsylvania sightings. Oh, yeah. I've been researching the prevalent sightings of large birds in Pennsylvania. And it was fascinating to learn that there are Ropen sightings too. Absolutely. Pennsylvania has a good number of sightings. Also Virginia, West Virginia, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri. It goes on and on and on. Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan. It better just, I'll name you the states where we don't have sighting reports that have been given to me yet. North Dakota and South Dakota. The rest of them have pretty much the rest of them, except maybe Alaska. I don't have a direct report from Alaska, but there are very few people that live in Alaska. The remaining states, basically, I have at least one eyewitness sighting report on, basically, but we'll get into that sometime. Yeah, thank you for joining us, KJ. I'm glad you got that video. It's I don't remember the name, but I think there's only one video on sightings in Pennsylvania, and that's a popular one for my channel. Yeah, trying to recall that particular one. Is that the one where there's two ladies who are bird watchers? Is that the one in Pennsylvania? The bird watchers, and it's either Pennsylvania or very close, state close to Pennsylvania. Bird watchers, and they see something that's not a bird. It's much too big. It's like the size of an airplane, and they're shocked. And these are ladies that know birds. They're bird watchers. Interesting to tell, but you know, a few years ago, I had somebody, a critic, you know, they're just trying to dismiss the sightings, and they say, oh, there can't be modern pterosaurs. If we had modern pterosaurs, then look at how many bird watchers we have in the United States, and none of them have ever seen a modern pterosaur because there's no such thing as modern pterosaurs. Well, the person that makes that kind of criticism, really, they seem to be taking a position of omnipotence, you know. If I don't hear something, then it cannot be, you know. If any bird watcher in the United States had seen a pterosaur, then they would report it and it would become famous, or I would know about it, or else some newspaper would report it and then I would see the newspaper and I would know about it. But I haven't seen anything like that, so it can't happen. Well, it's actually a little more complicated. The person that makes that kind of extreme criticism against the possibility of modern pterosaurs is probably not actually thinking like, I'm omnipotent. If I don't know about it, it can't be. It's not actually that, though it's too close for comfort, in my opinion. But what actually they're assuming is something like this. If there was a species of modern pterosaur in the United States, like back east, in an eastern state or southern state of the United States, then somebody would see it and they would report it, and then it would get into the newspapers, and then it would be published, and scientists would come and they would find it and they would observe it, and it would be coming in textbooks and everybody would know about it. Well, that simplistic idea is not reality. That's a fantasy. If you get into that, and usually the critics, super critics, they never get that far, but they just kind of have a vague idea of something like that, I think. But the reality is, well, I ask you, do you know of a newspaper article in the United States, not the 19th century, I don't mean the 1800s, but I mean 20th century or 21st century, an American newspaper that has published an article about a pterodactyl sighting, somebody seeing a pterosaur in their neighborhood or their area of the newspaper? Hey, do you know about such a newspaper and article about that? I've lost count. Some of them I've actually been the one that got the information to the newspapers, and the newspapers published it. Not necessarily friendly and positive, but they published something. For example, the Houston Chronicle. Now, if I understand, that's the second largest daily newspaper in the United States, so maybe not now. I think at one time it was. It's a very big newspaper. They did publish an article about my ideas of the morpholites, and they consulted two people that were not the right people to consult, and it was a quickly done research, not a deeply done research, because the newspaper professionals, they have so many things they have to do with so many different ideas and stories, and so they can't spend too much time with one thing. And of course, it's practically unbelievable, so they didn't get it. But they did publish the article in the newspaper in more recent years in North Carolina. So there are newspapers that publish articles about sightings of modern pterosaurs. It's just that there are not enough of them that any really good journalist will take that and say, oh, what's going on? And take all of that together and do a deep research and investigation. And also, I need to say this, I didn't realize it till a few years ago. I am an investigative journalist. So I didn't intend to be an investigative journalist. I am by the nature of what I'm doing and what I'm writing about. I'm a nonfiction writer, for sure, a nonfiction author. And I'm investigating this, and I'm publishing it and trying to get to the truth. I've been doing this for a long time. So I am trying this. So beware of people that just kind of dismiss it because they think, oh, it couldn't be real, or else it would be discovered by scientists. No, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. So, before we end, we need to get on this. It's been almost 2 hours now. How many people are there? How many of us are out there right now? Let's see. Quite a few, a lot, more than usual. Okay, so we'll continue. Any questions about anything that we've gone over or we haven't gone over? Because I'm in good health, fortunately, and I'm awake and I'm ready to go. The Ropen is the subject. I'm Jonathan Whitcomb. It's Protect Animal Life is the name of the channel. And you can contact me here for whatever reason. And the name of this particular episode is Pterodactyl Ropen. After tonight, this will automatically go onto YouTube as a regular recorded video, so you can watch parts of this or a whole thing if you want to. I don't know. It's a lot of talking I'm doing. If you're interested, of course, it's great. I'm happy. Most people don't really like to watch 2 hours of a video like this unless it's something that they really want to get into and learn about. And some of you are, and I'm grateful for that. But it will be available so that you can go over it and look at things here. We have the main page of the channel, Protect Animal Life, here. And anything else? It's been almost 2 hours now, so I can understand people want other things to do. There's other things that can be done. But we have a lot of people here right now. So I don't want to leave right away. I usually have more than the usual number of people. Pterosaurs are incredible flying creatures. They astonish the paleontologists who specialize in them. The way that they lived, the way that they had different species. And we only know about a tiny fraction of the ones that lived in the past from fossils. And now we have the reports of the modern ones that are accepted in some third world countries. They're just accepted. And in Western cultures like the United States, Canada, Australia, UK, Western Europe, of course, and in other countries that have somewhat adapted Western ideas, then it's thought of as being just impossible. It can't really be real. I mean, pterodactyls flying all over the place, all over the world, in all these different continents. I've received eyewitness reports directly from the eyewitnesses from 5 continents over the last 17 and a half years. And I'm greatly impressed by similarities in certain descriptions that keep coming back. Not all of the reports, but a great number of them. Not all of the details, but a great number of them. And the eyewitnesses come from different cultures, from different backgrounds, from different religious beliefs, from different educational experiences, from different languages, different parts of the world. Great variety of humans have seen similar flying creatures that are not bats, not birds, pterosaurs. That's what they are. KJ, I greatly respect that you approach this with a journalistic perspective. There seems to be more acceptance of UFOs following the New York Times reporting, so solid journalism on ropens could change minds. Thank you. I do the best I can, and I'll continue. I think the best thing for me to do is just keep on going. I'm 72 years old. I'll just keep on going and do everything I can to keep healthy and keep active and keep writing about it and making videos, keep communicating with people. And I hope to continue this for many years, and it will make a difference. And because of people like you that are watching this now, you make a huge difference. Without people like you, I would never gone anywhere. My work, I would not be doing this. I would not be possible, not conceivable without my associates. I can only name a few of them: Garth Guessman, David Wetzel, Paul Nation, many others. I know I'm missing many important people. Rex Yappy. So many have done so much. I would never have gone anywhere without them. I'm so grateful for them. And for all of you, and just being of such service is to watch these videos and to make comments. And I hope you can find people that you feel comfortable talking about. I understand it's not easy. I understand that, especially if you're an eyewitness. How do you approach it? We maybe should talk about this sometime, maybe next week, perhaps. Get into this. How do you deal with this? How do you tell people about this? It sounds so strange. One way, and remember the name of this video is Pterodactyl Ropen, is to use the word Ropen. And just simply use that word for a strange creature, a cryptid, like a Bigfoot is a cryptid, a Ropen is a cryptid, so that it's not quite so shocking. And then ask them, what is it like? Well, it looks like a pterodactyl. You can say that after you tell them the name Ropen. I would suggest that. And ropens are flying creatures that are found in all over the world, and they're somewhat rare in any particular place, but they're spread out over the world, and People from different cultures see them, different backgrounds see the same thing. And there are investigators like me and Paul Nation and David Wetzel, Garth Guestman. Wetzel and I have each written our own scientific paper on this, published in a peer-reviewed journal. Separate scientific papers we've written on, very positive about modern pterosaurs. We'll talk about that sometime too if you want. I mean, I'm a scientist. I like to get into this way of looking at it. But we do need to respect, there's some people that they have things they need to do. It's getting a few seconds before the 2-hour mark. We'll get right to 2 hours and say good night, come back a week from now. Friday afternoon evenings, Fridays, we have these live chats. Come back. God bless you. Be well and healthy and happy and successful, and use proper, reasonable care when talking to people about, see, I'm interested in the Ropen. I've heard about this Ropen, R-O-P-E-N. Good night.